A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go on a walking tour of the west end of Aspen. This was done by the Aspen Historical Society, and here I am with Amy Honey, who's one of the volunteers there outside the Resnick Center for Herbert Bayer. Ironically, Herbert Bayer, I'll come back to him in a little bit, but he was an artist and architect that hailed from Austria and then through Germany before arriving in Aspen, where he was hired by Mr. Pepke. The irony is I just got back from Honolulu, and there I attended a documentary on another Austrian architect by the name of Rudolf Schindler. Most of his works were done around Los Angeles, but he also had a modernism flair similar to Herbert Bayer. In addition to Bayer and Schindler, there's an architect in Honolulu by the name of Alfred Price that also hailed from Austria that did a lot of significant works in Honolulu. Now back to the West End here in Aspen, and Amy Honey did an incredible job of chronologically walking us through the early days with the gold rush in Denver in 1859 and talking about the boom in Aspen through the late 1800s. And I don't want to spoil the tour because I highly recommend you go on this tour. It was an incredible experience. But some of the highlights took place during the Victorian era, which is evident for anyone that spent any time in the west end of Aspen. And during that boom, Jerome Wheeler did very well, and some of his marks are still left on Aspen to this day, such as the Wheeler Opera House and the Hotel Jerome. And most significantly is the Wheeler-Stallard Museum on Bleecker, which is where the Aspen Historical Society is based. Which leads me to the first stop on the tour. So here we are at the Aspen Historical Society's home base, the Wheeler-Stallard Museum. And for those of you that know the west end of Aspen well, these neighborhoods typically will have a back street or back alley behind the home, but since Mr. Wheeler did not want to have that, he bought the entire block. And here is the front of the museum here. And as we start to walk to the east, we see the Ruth White Park, which is part of that entire block that he bought. And throughout Aspen, you'll notice these natural irrigation ditches, which really help with fire suppression. And there are also a lot of cottonwood trees that were planted around town. And here's a quick example of connecting a historic home to a new home. And here we have another historic home on the corner. And the West End is typically known for its Victorians, like I mentioned, but this is a really cool mid-century modern home. And as we were doing the tour, it was around the 4th of July, so you could appreciate the patriotism and the American flags there. And here's another modern home we walk by, and here is another natural irrigation ditch that runs throughout the town. Next, we have the Henry Weber home, which was done in the early to mid 1880s, and this is going to be the first all brick home at Pioneer Park, and it was done right around the same time as what is now like the Elks Lodge and the Isis Theater in town. Then we come to another historic home, which are kind of, I don't want to say a dime a dozen, but quite common here in the West End. And this next one is going to be Gretl's house. And for those of you that know Bonnie's restaurant up on Ajax Mountain, Gretl was the predecessor to Bonnie's, and she was a ski instructor. And if you could make out that bay window, believe it or not, both JFK and Jack Nicholson are rumored to have strudel in that kitchen. Here's another really cool home with a cool looking turret here. I'm not 100% sure if it's on the historic register, but it's a really cool architecture, which is a common theme throughout the West End. And this is going to be a home on Francis Street that Herbert Bayer lived in at one point in time, and it's indicative of his fencing that you'll see on the perimeter of the property. It's definitely a cool play on your typical white picket fence. It definitely gives it a nice flair of modernism on a traditional house. And here, once again, you see a connecting hallway connecting the old home to the new one. And here's one more with an older home connected to a newer one. And if you can believe it or not, that pattern, there's a mathematical equation to emulate music. And apparently there's a music room in there behind that wall. Always something fun here in Aspen. Now this next one with the American flags was a boarding house that was picked up and relocated from another part of town, and actually the band Chicago stayed here in this home. Once again, love the American flags this time of year. Now next up we have another mid-century modern home, and there's a great mixture of mid-century modern, Victorian era. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that you don't really see any Art Deco architecture in Aspen, and what Amy explained was because after the boom and bust of the Victorian era in the silver mining in the town. There was just no money during the 20s to build that style of home. So there was kind of a gap of wealth and construction in the town during that time. This next home at 309 West North Street was probably one of my favorite on the tour. It was designed by Herbert Bayer, and it's kind of emulating the snow caps on the mountains. It's got a really cool mid-century modern feel to it, and you can see actually a view of Ajax Mountain right around the corner here. But before we get to that view of Ajax Mountain around the corner, here's another nice, simple, historic style home. It's just on a single level, but just a real simple flow. And then this is a mansard roof, which is a French architecture style. And then we have one more home we're gonna walk by here. And this one's called the Chatfield House. And rather than me butcher it, I prefer you do this West End tour with the Historical Society. They're the experts when it comes to history here in Aspen. And there we've got that beautiful view of Ajax Mountain out the back. And if you have any questions about real estate here in Aspen, this is what I do for a living. I'm David Buck with Christie's International Real Estate. I can be reached at 808-371-3509. Thank you for watching.